A very good evening and welcome to a brand new edition of Weekend Primetime News. I'm Arundhati Mudanayakar, and as always, let's start off with a look at the stories making headlines tonight. Two-day workshop for ministers and UPFA parliamentarians under the auspices of the President. Minister Mahinda Samarasinghe, who arrived in the country, says they briefed the Human Rights Council about the progress achieved over the past 2.5 years. Opposition leader says the media has no other topic than Geneva. The stories in detail now. The US Embassy in Sri Lanka has issued a media release stating that media reports referring to the presence of US Special Forces being stationed in Sri Lanka are misleading.
The release noted that US military personnel are assigned to work in the US Embassy in Colombo as part of the bilateral engagement between the United States and Sri Lanka. The release highlights that the embassy defense attaché represented the US Department of Defense, and those assigned to that office support programs and training that enhance cooperation. It goes on to note that the US military had recently participated in joint training programs with Sri Lanka. However, the BBC reported yesterday that US Special Forces are present in 5 South Asian countries. Speaking before a congressional hearing, US Pacific Commander Admiral Robert Willard stated, quote, "We have currently Special Forces assist teams laid down in Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, as well as India," unquote. When we inquired about the matter from Army media spokesperson Brigadier Nihal Hapuarachi, he denied the presence of US Special Forces personnel in Sri Lanka for security purposes or joint military operations.
A two-day workshop for ministers and parliamentarians of the United People's Freedom Alliance began in Diathalava today under the auspices of President Mahinda Rajapaksa. The aim of the workshop is to engage in a debate on local, international, economic and political challenges that would need to be faced when implementing the Mahinda Chintana program.
The workshop was held at the Kotalawal Defence Academy in Diathalava. All political leaders within the ruling alliance participated in this workshop, along with ministers and parliamentarians of the UPFA. During the initial day of the workshop, the topic of the Sri Lankan economy and the global economic situation came under discussion. Attention was focused on key areas such as the stock market, unusual increase in fuel prices, social welfare and economic outlook.
Mahinda Chintanayen ආරම්භ කරපු අපේ ගමනේ
Several workshops such as this were held after we commenced the Mahinda Chintana program. They proved to be successful. When the President instructed us to come to Diathalava, several media reports emerged that we were going to be given a military training. We came here to be armed with political knowledge, not weapons. Our political outlook has been strengthened by the Mahinda Chintana program.
අපේ දේශපාලන දර්ශනයෙන් ශක්තිමත් වෙලා සන්නද්ධ වෙලා අපි තවත් ශක්තිමත් වෙලා යන්නයි අපි ආවේ.
China says that Sri Lanka should be given time and space to realize its national reconciliation. The Chinese delegate expressed this view addressing the 19th session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva yesterday.
China appreciates the commitment of the government of Sri Lanka to the process of national reconciliation. China is of the view that Sri Lanka should be given time and space so to realize its national reconciliation free from external pressure. Any assistance from the international community should be provided only with the consent of Sri Lanka.
The UK welcomes your efforts to end the death penalty and to promote women's rights and combat discrimination in all its forms. Such work is vital, particularly in countries suffering from conflict or on a period of transition. Progress in these areas rely on a practical, constructive approach, and we urge all countries to respond positively to recommendations. It is in this spirit that we call upon the government of Sri Lanka to implement the recommendations of their Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission.
The non-aligned movement welcomes the speedy publication of the LLRC report by the government of Sri Lanka. progress made in implementing its recommendations and the government's commitment towards reconciliation. NAM also welcomes Sri Lanka's continuous open engagement with the international community. Hence, any action by this Council is unwarranted. A functioning domestic mechanism should not be circumvented by interference until its conclusion.
Meanwhile, Sri Lankan Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Tamara Kunanayagam, responded to the views expressed by the US Under-Secretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights, Maria Otero, yesterday.
It is regretted that in a statement, the US Under-Secretary of State has thought it fit to unilaterally develop and set forth values that would guide the workings of this Council, departing from its founding principles, namely universality, impartiality, objectivity and non-selectivity. This intentional departure aims to legitimize the politicization of this Council and justifies its approach in treating countries such as Sri Lanka. Since the release of the LLRC report, the government has already commenced implementation of the recommendations through its domestic institutions and mechanisms. The UPR is the appropriate mechanism to discuss progress made in the promotion and protection of human rights of all countries. Sri Lanka will be presenting its report during the second cycle of the UPR in October this year.
Meanwhile, the group, including the head of the Sri Lankan delegation, Mahinda Samarasinghe, who attended the 19th session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, arrived in the island this morning. Minister Samarasinghe said that a resolution has not been presented against Sri Lanka officially as yet. He also said that the Sri Lankan delegation will leave for Geneva on the 14th again and will continue to face challenges successfully towards the victory of the country.
Opposition leader Ranil Wickremesinghe says that the media does not have any other topic other than Geneva these days. He expressed this view at a meeting held in Matale, Aluvihara today.
The government is carrying out suppression on media. Look at the media now. This morning, yesterday and day before, everything was about Geneva. Is it necessary to allocate the front page for this? Some television channels even show mountains in Geneva. I then inquired as why they are not showing cattle farms in Geneva because the price of milk powder is likely to be increased. What I say is that people will not be benefited if other stories are not shown. How will the price of milk powder be increased? Finally, it is us who is going to be the media. Even in 1973, all media was acquired. What happened to the UNP? Next time we will remain in power for 25 years. Last time we remained in power for 17 years. If our people did not fight, we would have lasted for 25 years.
Sri Lanka is the only country that makes bread from fuel. This statement was made by opposition leader Ranil Wickremesinghe. Responding to this statement, the Movement for People's Struggle noted that the opposition leader is creating absurd slogans.
Electricity tariffs as well as bus fares were increased. The government raised the prices of bread because the prices of fuel went up. Sri Lanka is the only country that makes bread from fuel. This is a Guinness record. In the future, they might start making sweetmeats for the Sinhala New Year using kerosene and crude oil. Ranil Wickremesinghe is inquiring as to why the prices of bread increased with the price of fuel. He is asking if bread is made using fuel. Nowadays, bread is being sold using small vans. They need fuel to run on. They cannot run on wheat flour. Most of the bakeries use electric ovens, so when the electricity tariffs were raised, the cost incurred increases. That is why the cost of bread increased. Raise fuel prices but do not increase bread prices. That is the slogan that the United National Party is now taking forward.
Meanwhile, the Secretary for Political Affairs of the Movement for People's Struggle, Pubutu Jagata, says that it is the government and not the people who have shied away from paying their debts to the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. He made this statement during a function held in the Ratmalana area yesterday.
The function was organised to appoint members to the Colombo District Operational Balamandala Committee of the Movement for People's Struggle.
දැන් සුසිල් ප්‍රේමජයන්ත මහත්තයා ඇවිල්ලා කියනවා මේ තෙල් සංස්ථාව පාඩුයි ණයට ගත්ත කට්ටිය ණය දෙවලා නැහැ ඒ නිසා මිල වැඩි කරන්න වෙනවා.
Susil Premajanta says that the CPC is running at a loss and that the debtors are not paying up. As a result of this, the prices were increased. I do not know when the first petrol shed was set up in Sri Lanka, but have you ever heard of any ordinary person who pumped fuel and stayed without paying? Everyone knows that petrol sheds do not issue fuel on credit. It is the government that took fuel on credit and refrained from making the payments. Government institutions and institutions affiliated to the government need to pay a total of nearly 55 billion rupees to the CPC. The Ceylon Electricity Board has obtained fuel on credit. Susil Premajanta should not make such statements in public. He should make it before the cabinet of ministers, because the ministers who sit beside him in the cabinet have obtained fuel on credit and have not made their payments.
කියන්න ඕනේ කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලය. මොකද එයත් එක්ක එකට කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලේ වාඩි වෙලා ඉන්න ඇමතිවරුන්ගේ අමාත්‍යාංශ තමයි කනිතේ සංස්ථාවෙන් තෙල් අරන් ණය ගෙවලා නැත්තේ.
Energy specialists say that the government did not take measures to revise electricity tariffs according to the proper mechanism this time around. They pointed out that the Public Utilities Commission, which is vested with the responsibility of deciding the electricity tariff, had not fulfilled their duty in the correct manner.
The Public Utilities Commission has the authority to revise the electricity tariff according to the established price regulation mechanism in electricity by every 6 months. However, they need to do a proper study about the expenses at the Ceylon Electricity Board and propose a price formula. Incidentally, the final price revision must be announced after obtaining public opinion in this regard.
Before electricity price revision or increase happens, the Public Utilities Commission on an annual basis should get the expenses of various divisions of the Electricity Board. Fuel surcharge is an anachronism, which means it was relevant only for the 1970s. In the 1970s, we have a full hydroelectric system. Suddenly, we have a drought and we have to run oil-fired power generation. For that year, we need a fuel surcharge, and the next year it will be withdrawn because we do not need fuel. 40 to 60% of our electricity production comes from coal or oil. Let the government through the treasury submit their views on as to what type of customers who have to be subsidized, and be clear on who is subsidized and who is providing the money for subsidy, because a subsidized electricity customer may be through various taxes paying his own subsidy.
Is the Ceylon Electricity Board incurring losses solely due to the fuel price hike? We will look into it tomorrow.
Time for a short commercial break. Stay with News First. We will be right back.